Is there a motion? Is there a motion to reopen the meeting?
So moved, Roberts.
Thank you, Commissioner Roberts. Is there a second?
Second, Sally.
Thank you, Commissioner Sally. All in favor? I do hear an echo.
Just turn your camera off.
Okay, thank you, Christian. All in favor, Commissioner Bondima?
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin?
Yes.
Commissioner Horwitz?
Yes.
Commissioner McFadden?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts?
Yes.
Commissioner Sally?
Yes.
And I am in favor. This motion passes 9 in favor with 1 absent. Is there a motion to approve the prior open session minutes?
So moved, Griffin.
Thank you, Commissioner Roberts. Is there a second?
Griffin.
Thank you, Commissioner Griffin. All in favor? Commissioner Bondima?
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin?
Yes.
Commissioner Horwitz?
Yes.
Commissioner McFadden?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts?
Yes.
Commissioner Sally?
Yes.
And I am in favor. This motion passes 9 in favor with 1 absent. Is there a motion to approve the closed session summaries?
So moved.
Who said that? Thank you, Commissioner Bondima. Is there a second?
Second, Griffin.
Thank you, Commissioner Griffin. All in favor? Commissioner Bondima?
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin?
Yes.
Commissioner McFadden?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts?
Yes.
Commissioner Sally?
Yes.
And I am in favor. This motion passes 8 in favor with 1 absent. This evening, our board is coming together once again to do our part in ensuring a successful educational experience for our Baltimore City students. We continue to collaborate with families, students, principals, teachers, district office staff, and all our stakeholders to advance the success of our young people. In this work, we understand that it is important we uphold the district's ongoing commitment to building a robust service delivery culture that provides transparency to those we serve. For the past 3 years, and under the outstanding leadership of Commissioner Michelle Bondima, our chair of the Board Strategic Planning Committee, our board worked hard to re-articulate our vision, mission, and strategic priorities for the district. With community and staff feedback as our guide, she led our board through a process where we have identified district SMART goals that will pinpoint progress using summative metrics and key performance indicators. These SMART goals will hold us accountable and guide the work of the system through school year 26-27. Once the dashboard is online, it will better inform the conversation between our board and the community about the accomplishments that we have made, as well as needs that still may exist in the district around literacy, student wholeness, leadership, and high school success and post-secondary readiness. Regardless of the vote's outcome tonight, our obligation to students we serve is unwavering. This is a first for our board and the system. I'm excited to be a part of something so critical. I'm honored to have worked with Commissioner Bondima, who shepherded this work with grace, patience, and excellence. I want to be clear. The board and the system cannot accomplish these goals alone. We are asking for everyone, our families, our teachers, our principals, district office staff, our elected officials, our neighborhood associations, our business community, and all of our stakeholders. If it takes a village, then we will need all hands on deck. You all have heard me say that before. I'll say it again. If it takes a village, then we will need all hands on deck to ensure success for all of our students. Thank you. Now I'd like for Commissioner Roberts to read our retiree list.
We now will be honoring our retirees with 30+ years of experience. Is Miss Ruby McCain with us? Ruby McCain began working with Baltimore City Public Schools on October 7th, 1968. She most recently served as a special education paraeducator at Lewis T. Murray Elementary Middle. Ms. McCain faithfully served the children of Baltimore City Public Schools for 53 years. Thank you so much for your service, Ms. McCain. And Eric Parker. Eric Parker began working with Baltimore City Public Schools on February 1st, 1990. He most recently served as a custodial worker 112 at Dickey Hill Elementary Middle. Mr. Parker faithfully served the children of Baltimore City Public Schools for 32 years. Thank you so much for your service, Mr. Parker. Well, thank you so much to Ms. Ruby McCain and Mr. Eric Parker. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Roberts. I want to now acknowledge some of the gifts and donations City Schools has received. Thank you to our donors and supporters for your generous support. I want to acknowledge a donation of $1,740 worth of custom artwork for school beautification from Colepiece LLC for Paul Lawrence Dunbar High School. I want to acknowledge the donation of $5,000 worth of tools from the Home Depot Foundation for College and Career Readiness Office. I'd like to also acknowledge the donation of $1,000 for gift cards to support curriculum instruction from Home Builders Institute and Home Depot donation grant for Patterson High School and Joseph C. Briscoe Academy. I would also like to acknowledge a donation of $128,143 to support Judy Center Small Grants Program at 12 schools from the Baltimore Community Foundation for the Early Learning Office. Thank you so much to all of our donors for these very generous donations. Is there a motion to approve the personnel and quasi-judicial matters?
So moved, Griffin.
Thank you, Commissioner Griffin. Is there a second?
Second, Bondima.
Second.
Bondima.
Thank you, Commissioner Bondima. All in favor, Commissioner Bondima?
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin?
Yes.
Commissioner McFadden?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts?
Yes.
Commissioner Sally? Oh. And I am in favor. This motion passes 7 in favor with 2 absent. I will now turn it over to Dr. Santelises for CEO comments.
Thank you, Chair Richardson. I would like to invite Sarah Deal, our acting Chief Human Capital Officer, for this evening's PEP agenda. Sarah?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Here's tonight's PEP. It is recommended that Christian Lorenzo, currently Assistant Principal, Baltimore Polytechnic Institute, be appointed Educational Specialist 2, School Counseling Pupil Services, effective July 8th, 2022. It is recommended that Lori Sutton, currently Coordinator, School Turnaround, Chief of Schools, be appointed Director, Summer and Expanded Learning, Office of Extended Learning, effective April 25th, 2022. It is recommended that Candace Purcell Nixon, currently Assistant Principal, Calvin M. Rodwell Elementary Middle, be appointed Interim Principal at Calvin M. Rodwell Elementary Middle, effective March 23rd, 2022. And finally, it is recommended that Samuel Rather, currently Principal of Calvin M. Rodwell Elementary Middle School, be appointed Director of Equity-Centered Principal Development, Chief Executive Office, effective March 23rd, 2022. Dr. Santelises?
Thank you so much, Sarah, and congratulations to everyone. I do want to provide a little more background about our newest principal. Candace Purcell Nixon has effectively served Baltimore City Public Schools for the last 22 years and currently as an assistant principal at Calvin Rodwell Elementary Middle School. She has held the following positions: a classroom teacher for 17 years, an educational associate for 4 years, a program administrator for Student Learning Center, and a resident principal. Mrs. Purcell Nixon states, "As the future of our country depends on education, I continually seek to provide all students with equitable opportunities that will advance them academically and socially. Educating children has always been at the very foundation from which I advocate, and now I will reach beyond the classroom to support all educational stakeholders." She holds a bachelor's degree from Morgan State University, a master's of teaching degree from Johns Hopkins University, and 30+ credits in educational leadership from Jones International University. Congratulations, Principal Purcell Nixon. Tonight, I am pleased to introduce our student media team members and their staff sponsors to share the next evolution on the next iteration of student-driven communications work in city schools. For nearly a decade, this group of students has generated videos and commercials for many of our communications platforms, and tonight they are here to share how they will elevate the voice of city school students even more. I will now cede the floor to Tina Highcupboard, our Chief of Communications and Community Engagement, to introduce our students. Chief Highcupboard.
Good evening, Dr. Santelises, and thank you for allowing us today to come during your time to present the amazing work that our students have been doing as part of our student media team and the evolution over the past several years. Next slide, please. So since 2005, our student media team has provided real industry-level training for students, ranging from multi-camera live streaming events, covering stories, taking photographs, and making TV shows and promos. At its height, the student media team met weekly and included more than a dozen students per year as participating in the program. During the pandemic, the student media team met infrequently due to the health and safety protocols. While the pace slowed, though, our students continued to produce short PSAs, including many about health and safety. And this year's team launched in late fall. We've been working very hard and meeting in person every single week. Quickly, I want to introduce the team responsible to make this happen. Andre Riley, Executive Director of Communications, Abby Lane, the Manager of Communications, Jewel Carter, Production Specialist, our newest member of the comms team, Reggie Dackham, who is the Production Assistant and has been working with the students every day. And I'd like to now have the students introduce themselves, representing 9 high schools across the district. So students would mind coming on now and say your name, your grade, and a quick note of why you joined the student media team. Thank you. Go ahead, sweetie. Go ahead and start.
Hello, my name is Serenity Johnson. I'm from Baltimore Design School. I'm a sophomore, and I joined the student media team to have more research in why I like to be a team and why we should come together as students to hear our voice.
Mitchell, you can go next.
Hi everyone, my name is Mitchell Napper. I am a current 11th grader at Baltimore School for the Arts. I joined the media team with interest in definitely making sure student voices are heard. Specifically, my reason for joining was hosting, but I am also very interested in making sure that student voices are heard, making sure that students are seen and that they feel like their opinions matter as well.
Thank you. Bianca, you'd like to go?
Okay. Hi, my name is Bianca Spalding. I am a 12th grader and I go to National Academy Foundation. And I joined the student media team because my interest in graphic design, and now I'm getting an interest in photography, and I really like working there.
Thank you. Do we have any other student media team members with us this evening? I don't see any other names. So I'm going to have our team go ahead and play a short, brief video to introduce some work that the students have done. Andre?
1 second, Tina. Coming right back.
We are the City Schools TV Student Media Team. We cover school events throughout the city. Some of us do graphic design and some of us like to edit. Some of us love being in front of the camera while some of us love being behind the camera. But we all have one goal, to make sure that you all are kept up to date with what's going on at City Schools. So with that being said, hit the subscribe button and tap the little bell in the corner to join us on this journey. It's gonna be lit.
Thank you, Andre. It's a fantastic short video just to give an introduction to our student team. There's a few other slides, and we're going to hear from another one of our students and have a quick last video. So the student media team's content. We are focusing on a wide range of content, including videos, live streaming, photos, graphic design, products like flyers, and podcasts. The goal is to provide students with a wide range of experiences so they have the foundational skills they can use to explore careers in this field. Next slide, please. And the purpose of the media team is to share content in a way that resonates with our students. And it produces content that elevates student voice and shares stories and interests that matter to students. So we make sure that City Schools information is being shared in a student-friendly and respectful way, so the students are getting the information from City Schools. But moving forward, you're also going to notice a change in the topic the students choose to cover. We are actually asking students to generate content and ideas that are theirs. We'll help with the technical parts, but most of production will be about their work. We want to make sure that students have the opportunity to bring forward stories they'd like us to share, not just sharing our content from City Schools, but sharing messages that students want to share with their peers, with City Schools. So in addition to the things we're going to share with students, you're going to see a switch in how our students are producing their content, because they're going to be interviewing their peers across the city and understanding what they would like us to produce and share on their behalf. I'm going to turn this over to Bianca Spalding, who we just met a few minutes ago, a senior at NAV. She's an Urban Alliance intern on the social media team, student media team, who's been accepted to Temple University. She wants to major in film and media production. Her internship recently, coordinator wrote us to say that she loves her internship with us. It's a perfect position for her, and will be sad, she'll be sad when it ends. And I would love for Bianca to talk about her experience with the student media team and how it helped you focus on what you want to do in college.
Okay, I stay focused in the student media team because I like, other than everybody else, I like to be creative all the time. And when I got introduced to this job, it was like, yeah, I want to do this. And it was rough for the first few weeks, but then after I got used to it, and I'm starting liking my coworkers now and going out to take pictures and everything, since we don't really go out anymore because of the pandemic. And I'm glad I got into Temple for film and media, because once I go in there, I already know what I'm doing, thanks to Reggie with the cameras and everything.
Fantastic, Bianca, thank you. Congratulations for getting into Temple. I know you can represent City Schools really well when you do your media production over there. Before the pandemic, we worked to show a video from the student media team at the beginning of each board meeting. We look forward to returning to that schedule as soon as possible. In the meantime, you may visit the student media team's playlist on City Schools TV YouTube page to watch all of their videos, including the one we're going to play with right now. And then please reach out to the student media team or share ideas for video projects, especially students. You can email at communications@bcps.k12.md.us. So we're going to close. The video will be the last part of our presentation, and then we'll turn it back over to Dr. Santelises. Andre?
Here on City Schools TV, you will find information for students, families, and staff about important meetings and school gatherings. You can also catch our student media team TV shows and coverage of stories and events at our schools, school board meetings, and live streams. City Schools TV also helps with health and safety updates and provides a place for students to share their voice. So make sure you tune into City Schools TV on YouTube, Channel 77, and the district website. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram at Baltimore City Schools.
That's it for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina, the comms team, and most important, all of the young people who are doing fantastic work. I will say some of the best interviews that I get as CEO come from our student communications team. They help out in everything from the weekly filming of the CEO address to asking questions that students want to hear the answers to. So I want to thank them for all the hard work they do, and just to let them know that we really believe that they continue to represent our city, their schools, their families, and their communities well. So thank you for sharing this evening. I also want to acknowledge some other outstanding students in Baltimore City Schools and recognize that 3 of our high school basketball teams are now officially state champions. And I think that is really important. 3 state championships at one time. First, congratulations to Western girls basketball team for winning the state championship in Class 4A. They defeated Clarksburg 81-68. So that was not a squeak by victory. This is Western's 3rd state championship and its first since 1995. I also want to send a big shout out to graduating senior guard, Nisera Pryor, who scored 40 points in the championship game. And that's the 2nd highest points scored in a state basketball championship in state history. So congratulations to Coach Latasha Townsend and every member of the Western team. Next, the Poly girls basketball team won their first state championship in Class 3A. And they defeated Howard 60-37. Yes. Congratulations to Coach Kendall, Peace Abel, and the entire Poly girls team. And then finally, Lake Clifton boys basketball team won the state championship in Class 1A for the 7th time in history and the 3rd year in a row. Congratulations to Coach Herman, Tree Harried, and the Lake Clifton boys team. We are very proud of you. And then I also, because when city schools, young people bring it, we bring it in all areas. So we started out with communications and the arts. We moved to athletics. And then also we showed up and dominated at the Maryland VEX IQ State Championship in robotics. The IQ State Championship was held on Saturday, March 12th at Newtown High School in Owings Mills. 21 city schools teams competed in both middle school and elementary divisions, representing nearly half of all the teams across the state competing. In the elementary division, Team B from Arlington Elementary School were the state champions in teamwork. Team C from Baltimore International Academy were robot skills champions, and Team C from Arlington Elementary School was 3rd overall in skills score statewide. All 3 teams qualified for the World Championship to be held in Dallas on May 10th through 12th. So Baltimore City is headed to Dallas to represent, and I do need to just emphasize that those are all schools in the state of Maryland. So that includes private, parochial, and public schools, and our robotics team showed out. In the middle school division, Team A from Commodore John Rogers Elementary Middle won the Judges Award. Team A from Baltimore International Academy won 3rd place in the Teamwork Challenge, and both qualified for the World Championship in Dallas, Texas on May 8th through 10th again. And teams A and B from Commodore also qualified for World Championships. Overall, the following schools are sending, all the schools I named are sending a total of 8 teams to the World Championships this season. We think that this is the most teams City Schools has ever qualified to participate in the World Championships in a single season. Additionally, Baltimore City College is also competing at the U.S. Open in April. So I just want to thank and give huge shout out to Gino, Tagate, the team coaches, and every student who competed. I remember as chief academic officer when we were just starting robotics in City School. It was fledgling, people weren't sure about it, and now, frankly, we are dominant, dare I say, amongst all schools in the region. So shout out, it just goes to prove when we seed early with our young people, they compete with the best of the best and come out on top. So congratulations to all of our student winners this evening. And then finally, it is now my great pleasure to recognize our food and nutrition team led by Executive Director Liz Marquetta. I recently received a letter from Aisha Holmes, Director of No Kid Hungry Maryland, commending the outstanding work done by the team in preparing and serving meals to our students and families throughout the pandemic. As cited in the letter, throughout the pandemic, Baltimore City Public Schools food and nutrition staff have risen to the challenging task of ensuring meals are getting to students despite supply chain issues, staffing shortages, and last-minute school closures. When many communities shut down and many school system staff worked from home, the food and nutrition staff continued going to work, serving as first responders out in the community in all kinds of weather. Without their efforts, many children and families would have had a hard time accessing the food they need. According to No Kid Hungry, since schools first closed in March 2020 to September 2021, Baltimore City Schools served 3,563,612 meals through an extended summer food service program, plus an additional 815,913 after-school meals. That's a total of approximately 4.3 million meals. Just a really critical and tangible demonstration of dedication of our food and nutrition teams, our schools, our students, and our families. I am always proud to serve as CEO of City Schools, but I think tonight, just honoring the professionalism of teams like our food and nutrition team, as well as the accomplishments of our students and hard work of our teachers, it really does make this kind of recognition important. So thank you very much to Director Marquetta and the entire food and nutrition team. Please accept my congratulations and gratitude. And Madam Chair, this concludes my remarks for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Santelises. I will now review the consent agenda. Board colleagues, please let me know if you want an item removed, and please state your question for staff. I am pulling items 8.01 gifts and donations, 8.03 district priorities and performance measurement, 8.04 waiver request for Balt's curriculum project, 8.05 policy GCIDA staff travel and reimbursement, 8.06 policy FFA naming/renaming a school facility, second reader, so that our student commissioner can vote on them. We will also hear a presentation on item 8.03. Do any other commissioners want to pull any of the following items for questions? 8.02, 21st Century Annual Report.
Chair Richardson, I just have a question in the actual report. I think it's on page 30 and 31, table 4, that deals with the actual school building program amendments.
Okay, hoping staff got that.
Just want to make sure that the dates are correct for the recommendations that we see in this, since we're voting on it.
Okay, thank you. 13.01, catering services. 15.01, the Sherwin-Williams Company. 15.02, outdoor furniture and accessories. 15.03, Teletrack Navman US Ltd, automatic vehicle location. 18.01, Carney, Callahan, Bressler, Bennett, and Scher for a contract increase, and 19.01, promotional items contract increase. 20.01, Hemorrhage Incorporated. Okay, so we are pulling 8.02 of that list. We'll pull all the ones mentioned, but in addition to that, 8.02. Okay, we do not have anyone signed up for public comment, but we do want to recognize our recognized groups. They will have the opportunity to speak for 5 minutes. We have Jocelyn Providence representing the Baltimore Teachers Union.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Providence, and I will be commenting on behalf of the Baltimore Teachers Union. The COVID-19 Health and Safety Guide has not been updated since February 9th. A lot has changed since then. There is no updated guidance to reflect how to maintain the important mitigation strategies that we are, now that we are mask optional, and there is nothing updated to support immunocompromised students and school staff. As a teacher, I know that it is very difficult to adapt and support students who transfer into my class during the middle end of the school year. However, I know that nearly all teachers will agree with me that regardless, this happens every year, especially when there is a safety transfer that needs to occur. Why aren't students and families given the option of a safety transfer to the virtual school to protect the health and wellness of themselves and their family? Not allowing students and families to have the option comes across as ableist and insensitive. It is very disappointing that BCPSS has still not publicly stated a plan on how to handle the next COVID wave that could occur before the end of the school year, or even address how they will plan to handle students coming back after spring break. With the mask optional policy, will masks be required the first week back while as many students as possible get tested? Will the dashboard be reflected to show the results from the testing immediately after spring break so students and families are updated? This didn't happen after winter break, but I would hope that it would happen now that masks are optional. It seems like the district and many other businesses and governmental orgs are on the road to get back to this, quote, business as usual. This business as usual has looked like not giving any more COVID updates, not planning ahead, and not dealing with the repercussions of past decisions that have negatively impacted individuals. This has also looked like forgetting the students and school staff that have been negatively impacted and not figuring out how to support those people. I know multiple school staff members who have gotten COVID from school, from students that they teach, and who are suffering from long COVID. There have been no updates to the COVID leave policy to support school staff with long COVID, and that is simply unacceptable. School staff who have dedicated so much of their time, energy, years should not have to exhaust their own sick days while they are recovering from an illness that they received at work. Teachers and other school staff have had to put their health on the line
Jocelyn,
so that they could recover. Yes.
Jocelyn, can you hear me? So you froze up. Why don't you go back a couple sentences? Because you froze up.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me a little bit better now?
Yep, I hear you perfectly.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry about that. So I'll say there have been no updates to the COVID leave policy to support school staff with long COVID, and is simply unacceptable. School staff who have dedicated so much of their time and energy should not have to exhaust their own sick days while they are recovering from an illness that they received at work. Teachers and other school staff have had to put their health on the line, and some have had to pay the ultimate costs. And to continue to exploit these people and not give them the option to apply for permission leave for a period of time so they could recover is disrespectful. Wellness days are nice, but if you truly care about the people who are serving the students, you would give them that time that they need to recover. A couple of years ago, I had to step in and break up a fight between students because no one else was around at the time. I put my own health on the line for my students. I shouldn't have had to, but I did. And I received permission leave to recover from my injuries from doing so. Any school staff member who is suffering from long COVID deserves to get permission leave to recover from their injuries so that they are not permanently damaging their health. And despite everything going on, teachers are still showing up to work, still going above and beyond the call of duty every single day. And yet, in this very mentally and physically exhausting year, we are met with another hurdle of unannounced formal observations. Contrary to what most people might think, observations do not happen all the time in school buildings, and they do not happen consistently. As I'm sure many administrators and principals would agree, they have a lot on their plate, and they cannot solely focus on giving feedback for observations. However, unannounced formal observations will not give that supportive feedback and authenticity that people desire. They will not reduce any bias from observations that the system already exists, and they will not show an authentic implementation of the instructional framework. What they will do is they will increase teacher burnout and they will increase stress. Finally, there are so many times that BTU is not consulted for feedback or given the opportunity to survey our membership before a policy or decision is being made. There was no follow-up with the teachers like myself who applied for the educator consultant group back in November. There is no transparency or engagement with teachers who want to support in the development and crafting of ideas, solutions, projects, and policies. With no involvement, and as Chair Richardson stated, collaboration from BTU and no transparent process for teachers to be involved, it looks like the district does not care about the feedback. This is my last sentence. Thank you.
Okay, there we go. There we go.
All right, this is my last sentence here. I got a little delayed before.
You were on a roll. I'm sorry to stop you, but go ahead.
Okay, yes, no problem. With no involvement and collaboration from BTU, no transparent process for teachers to be involved, it looks like the district does not care about the feedback of us at all. Even though we are the people who are the most connected with students and families, which again is why there is such a huge trust issue and many teachers who might be planning to leave at the end of the school year, because who wants to work in an environment where there's no trust or transparency anyway? Thank you for your time, and thank you for communicating with me when there was a little bit of a Wi-Fi issue.
It's all good. It's all good. Thank you, as always. Thank you so much. Next, we have Carl Perry, representing the Public School Administrators and Supervisors Association.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Vice Chair McFadden, other commissioners, and Dr. Santelises. It's a pleasure to speak with you on behalf of the nearly 600 dedicated administrators across our district. I pray that you have all been well and are taking care of yourselves as we move into spring. I've learned that we must listen to our bodies, and self-care is essential for life, so please pace yourselves and take care. I come to you this evening to thank you for your advocacy and plans to significantly increase the funding for most of our schools. This is the beginning, allowing us adequate funding to start to provide the appropriate resources for our students. This has long been overdue, and though it is not nearly even the playing field, it does provide a glimpse into the window for how schools can and should be funded. Most schools created numerous additional positions. Plans are to increase robust arts and enrichment programs, providing activities which focus on the whole child, including mental health supports, as well as academic interventions. Moving forward, we need the district to ensure that every position is filled. Of course, schools are actively recruiting and interviewing new employees for their campuses. The district may need to provide hiring bonuses for everyone, referral bonuses to current employees, including some type of matching bonuses. We need to make sure that every position is filled to make this work for our children. We also need flexibility in the scheduling process. For example, if classes are created and ultimately not filled, then a void is present in a child's schedule, and the need for substitutes will arise yet again. This creates missed learning opportunities for our children. Allow leverage in the scheduling calendar for schedules to be modified as long as schools are ready for opening day. We want to be ready, and we want to be great for our children. In addition to these asks, we ask that student behavior continue to be addressed. Years ago, there was a character education proposal presented. For a model, you may look at what Durham Public Schools did when they became a distinguished character education school district. We need character traits across all schools all year. Traits such as self-discipline, respect, perseverance, citizenship, just to name a few. We need to focus on the traits and present them across the K through 12 spectrum. Let this become an entire citywide initiative. Imagine our character traits scrolling on buses, billboards, being broadcast across TV stations. Even police and fire departments publicize what the traits are. Local celebrities, as well as sports teams, do the same. Most importantly, every city agency joins us. We will provide examples using a curricular approach to improve behavior and self-esteem for everyone, including adults. We are expected to be accountable for everything already, so we should lead the positive change for all of Baltimore City. Thank you for your time. Have a nice evening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Perry, as always. Thank you for joining us. So I want to go to the pulled items from our consent agenda. So items 8.01, gifts and donations, 8.03, district priorities. That's going to be a presentation, right? So, all right, so 8.01, should we do the, I'm sorry, this is the process question. Eric can vote on those. Thank you. Okay, my team is all here with me tonight, so I know you all heard that. Thank you. 8.01, 8.04, 8.05, and 8.06. We wanted to pull those so that our student commissioner could vote. So is there a motion to approve those items?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner McFadden. Is there a second?
Second, Roberts.
Thank you, Commissioner Roberts. All in favor? Commissioner Bondima?
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin?
Yes.
Commissioner Horwitz?
Yes.
Commissioner McFadden?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts?
Yes.
Commissioner Sally?
Yes.
And I am in favor. This motion passes with 9 in favor and 1 absent. We're going to go to 8.02 first. Okay, so can we go to 8.02 and if staff is ready to answer the question for Commissioner McFadden?
Yes, our interim director of 21st Century, Michael McBride, should be here.
Hi, it's Michael McBride. Can you pose the question, please?
Right, so on page 30 and 31, we see table 4.
Yes.
We see 21st Century School Building Program Amendment. Since we're voting on it, I just want to make sure that we're specific about the dates that we voted on. So all of these buildings are not based on what we voted on. They're not all closing effective this summer. Some are closing effective 2023. And I do see that New Era is 2023, but I think it should be the same for a few others. But Nart Harris, there has a close effective summer date there too. So I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on the program recommendations there in that particular plan.
Wait, Andrew, would you like to speak to that, please?
Sorry, I looked at the presentation online. Is there a way someone can just present, show the thing where there's a question, just so I can see what the board is seeing?
It's page 30 and 31. It's in the final annual report.
And perhaps if you state the name of the school, then Angela can weigh in on it, please.
Yeah, so this is from, so this report is from before the board voted. So this was listing the schools that were proposed. So you can see this is on November 9th, that the final vote will occur in January. So this report, I think, was completed in December. So it didn't reflect, it's not reflecting what you actually decided. So like in the update, you won't see like a Bernard Harris, for example, because you did not approve the closure. So this is as a point in time. So this section is from prior to the board voting.
Thank you, Angela. So then so specifically, can you just remind us what we're voting on tonight?
So I think that's a question for Michael, sorry.
So
Are
you're
we
voting on
this
approving
plan
the
that's
annual
presented?
report. You're voting on approving the annual report. It's in the annual report because the annual report was drafted, parts of it were drafted prior to tonight. But you're just approving the annual report in its whole. This does not change your vote that you took. Your vote on the actual schools is what directs what happened with those schools. We could certainly, Michael, we could maybe think about how to convey maybe an amendment or a cover letter to make clear that what the board's actions actually were on those to reflect the vice chair's concern.
Sure. I mean, we could effectively do an amendment, but again, as you said rightfully, the annual report captures a moment in time, if you will, and those actions were after that moment in time, if you will.
The report is actually written in November, and it's due to the state. It's based on last year, so it's from the point in time when it was written, which was in November. And the MSA has to approve it. The multiple partners have to approve it. That's why it's coming to you now. But it reflects it's last year's annual report. Really, it's due to the general. It's written in November.
Understood. So a year from now, we'll get another report with all of the actions that that makes sense. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Can I get a motion to approve 8.02? Say it again.
The remaining consent.
Got it. Were there any other questions about 8.02 before we do a consent vote? All right. Then is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? I'm sorry, what are you saying? Sorry. Right. That's pulled. All right. So the consent agenda would be all of the items except 8.03, which is going to be a presentation to us and be pulled for presentation. Is there a motion to approve the remaining consent agenda items except for 8.03?
So moved, Bandima.
Thank you, Commissioner Bandima. Is there a second?
Second, Reed.
Thank you, Commissioner Reed. All in favor? Commissioner Bandima?
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin?
Yes.
Commissioner McFadden?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts?
Yes.
Commissioner Sally?
Yes.
And I am in favor. This motion passes 8 in favor with 1 absent. Okay. Now we'll go to the information, the 8.02. That's right. All right, we'll get a presentation for 8.03.
Good evening, commissioners. Good evening, Dr. Santelises, colleagues, and members of the public. My name is Teresa Jones, and I have the privilege of serving as Chief Achievement and Accountability Officer here in City Schools. This evening, we will share with you the proposal regarding the district priorities and performance measurement. Before we begin, I would also like to extend my appreciation to Dr. Mandima for her leadership of the Strategic Planning Committee and for the members of the board who provided really valuable feedback to inform the evening's presentation. Let's go to the next slide, please. So when we think about the district goals and our performance measurement framework, I first wanted to just remind everyone that all of the work that we do at the district is intended to support the board's strategic priorities. You see those listed here. I'll come back to those momentarily, but I did just want to start by acknowledging that this work of the Strategic Planning Committee was really intended to bring to life the strategic priorities and how those would be measured going forward. Next slide, please. So when we think about our performance measurement framework, first, I want to just provide a little bit of grounding. So again, looking at the board's mission and vision, you see those stated at the top of the pyramid here. Our mission is to provide a quality education that focuses on the total development of each child, equipping all students with the life skills and academic foundation needed to contribute to our changing society. And the vision is that city schools are safe learning environments where students receive a diverse and inclusive education that equips them for success. So with this mission and vision in mind, the board undertook an effort through the Strategic Planning Committee to actually think through not just the district's strategic priorities that were on the prior slide, but also to give direction to develop what we are now going to introduce this evening, which are the district goals. And so let's go to the next slide. The district goals are intended to support accountability while also mobilizing the community to foster improvements in student achievement, student attainment of their post-secondary goals, and to prepare young people to become engaged community contributors. In essence, these goals are intended to focus our attention in order to realize the mission and vision that you saw on the prior slide. Next slide, please. So when we think about the proposed set of district goals, I want to remind everyone that we first shared a draft version of district goals with the public and the board on January 25th. At that time, we did share a framework that included having 4 district goals that create the level of alignment and support for the district's blueprint, and also specifically aligns to the priority areas you see on the right. This evening, I want to acknowledge that based on the board's feedback, we are 3 focus area goals. Those are the 3 that you see here. More students reading on grade level, more students feeling connected and supported at their school, and more students graduating on time. We are going to unpack those in turn this evening, provide you some background and context around the goals, as well as the targets for the 2026-27 school year. In addition to that, I want to acknowledge that the 4th goal was intended to align to priority 2, which was to specifically have a staff-focused goal that aligns to the leadership pillar of the district's blueprint. We've taken that off for this evening, but I do want to just acknowledge that there is some future work to be done so that we can bring forward a proposal to address that specific area. Again, as you can see on the right, we've mapped each of the goals that are presented with the various priorities, and you can see that there are some of those goals are aligned to 1 or more, and then you can just sort of see how that maps out by looking at this slide. Next slide. So as we think about the goals themselves, we can't talk about goals without acknowledging that the way that goals are developed and are actually actualized is through strategies and the implementation of those strategies. So what I want to acknowledge here is that underlying those goals are really 2 key strategic documents that really articulate where we are as a school system and the prioritized set of resources that we are utilizing, the efforts that we are undertaking, and what those are intended to accomplish. So we're going to go next to a slide that just sort of gives a quick overview both of the blueprint and our Reconnect, Restore, and Reimagine plan. So again, as a reminder, the Blueprint for Success was introduced several years ago, and it has 3 pillars: literacy, student wholeness, and leadership. And as we went about providing a proposal around district goals, we wanted to remind folks that that blueprint has not gone away. even though we focused a lot of attention here in the last couple of years around the recovery efforts that are affiliated with our Restore, Reconnect, and Reimagine plan. So again, the blueprint is still alive, and so we want to make sure that we continue to keep folks mindful of that as we do our work. Next slide. As it relates to the Reconnect, Restore, and Reimagine platform around recovery, again, you've seen these slides before. This is just intended to just reground folks in the fact that we have a set of preconditions and overarching commitments that are then undergird the key strategies, which we have been focused on during this recovery period. So while we are in the first year technically of recovery, which allows us to utilize the additional influx of federal dollars that have come forth, we have sort of these 5 areas as the areas that have been prioritized. What I want folks to have an appreciation for as we think about the focus district goals is that these are the strategies that will actually bring that to life. So let's move to the next slide, please. So when it comes to how those strategies come together, for this evening's presentation, we're not going to do a complete review of the different strategies. We just wanted to put before the board and the public a reminder that there are a whole host of different activities that are underway that are coordinated with an effort towards accelerating the rate of growth in academic achievement for our students as they have been impacted by the pandemic. I know we've talked about the student learning plans really being a focus for us. Because of the interest in really mobilizing the community around this work, we want to continue to remind folks that these are the ways that people can get engaged. And so when we talk later in the presentation about our communication and engagement efforts with stakeholders, we just want to lift up and remind folks that there are multiple ways that we can all work together to support our students in these various efforts. And ultimately, those will all come together to help us achieve the goals that we agree to as a school system. Next slide, please. So when it comes to the proposal this evening, I'm going to start with just an overview by way of a summary, and then we'll unpack each of the focus areas in turn. So the idea, again, is that we have, for this evening, 3 goals. They are aligned to literacy, wholeness, and high school success. Literacy and wholeness are directly aligned to 2 of the 3 pillars of the blueprint. The first one, which is more students reading on grade level, is intended to be measured long-term by looking at the proficiency of students in grades 3 through 8 and grade 10 on the state assessment for reading and English language arts. What we've noted here is that we've set a target or proposed target of 40% by 2026-27. We want to acknowledge that there has been a disruption in the administration of the state assessment due to the pandemic. And so the data point that we've referenced as a baseline is based on the last year that that assessment was administered. So that was the PARCC assessment, which is now transitioning to the MCAP, so the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program. And that was last administered in school year 18-19. So again, that baseline number is pre-pandemic, and that was at 19%. When it comes to our second focus area around student wholeness, the goal is to have more students feeling connected and supported at their school. And for this particular long-term measure, we have developed a new measure, which is a composite score derived from our student survey. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that momentarily. But what I want to acknowledge here is that when we think about the target, that target, there's actually, I believe, a typo on this slide. The target should actually be 80%. That's on a following slide. The baseline that's listed is 61%. That 61% was from the beginning of year administration of our student survey. So unlike the prior item, we do not have multiple years of data to refer to inform the development of the target. So we only have that one data point, but it is one that showed that as a district, we were at 61% with the first use of this student wholeness score. And then the third area around high school success is looking towards having more students graduating on time. And for this long-term measure, we're proposing use of the 4-year adjusted cohort graduation rate, which is a measure that is used for state and federal accountability. And it speaks to one of the most familiar ways that we measure student success, which is their completion of high school. And in doing so, what we have noted here as a target is 76%. And that would be a significant increase versus our most recent result for the class of 2021, where that rate was 69.2%. Next slide, please. So as we go into the section now to unpack each of these, I'll provide a little bit more context around the reason that this particular goal was proposed, some insights around our historical performance, and other considerations that have led into the proposed target that you see noted here. When it comes to literacy, again, I want to acknowledge that we are in recovery mode and we recognize that all students would benefit from an accelerated rate of growth. And so one of the things I want to note is while the long-term measure is a summative measure that looks at proficiency, we are also going to be progress monitoring towards that proficiency by looking at a progress measure, which really looks at growth. And so I've noted here that the progress measure is the percentage of students that are meeting or exceeding their growth targets when it comes to reading and English language arts, and doing so specifically in grades kindergarten through 8. That is considered to some extent to be a leading indicator, if you will. And so again, I want to acknowledge that while there's a proposed target of 40%, that is in part an acknowledgement that it will take some students longer to cross that threshold to be proficient. And so we wanted to ensure that as we propose targets, that they were considered SMART targets, SMART goals, to the extent that they are specific, they are measurable, that they are attainable, and that there's a realistic component to them, as well as being time bound. So as we think about where we will be 5 years from now, with the additional resources and strategies that we have in place, we would certainly look to accelerate the level of improvement that we've seen historically. And so for context, when we take a look at how we have performed historically, we wanted to note that prior to the pandemic, our highest rate of increase was actually 2 percentage points per year, and our proficiency rate was 19%. We also took a look at what the average was over that period of time, and that average was 1.6 percentage points. So I want to acknowledge that there is a level of stretch that has been reflected in this target. And in essence, in order from a mobilization perspective, for us to really think about that 40% as really doubling the number or percentage of students that are reading on grade level versus where we were performing prior to the pandemic. I also just want to provide as an additional background that for the first time, the state actually had a non-end of the year administration of a state assessment for ELA and math. And this year it was the early fall MCAP. And the reason that the state implemented that was to have some indication around how students were going to be sort of starting the school year, recognizing that the pandemic likely had an effect. And so while they did not administer an assessment last spring, students were asked to take fall in the very grade level that they were in the prior year. So if you were a 5th grade student this fall, you were asked to take the MCAP for the 4th grade English language arts assessment. So the idea being that this would give us an indication around how students were starting the year, and so that, you know, educators would have access to that information and families, just as an indication around where we may need to start from, knowing that there could have been a significant level of impact. So what you see noted here is that when we look at our English language arts performance, our overall proficiency rate was 16% based on that early fall assessment. Again, I just want to note that that is not intended to be the marker that the state will use for accountability purposes. They will resume using the spring assessment as the main input for purposes of the accountability system. In addition to that, as I made note of earlier, the intent here is that we wanted to propose a target that would factor in the blueprint and our 3 strategies and those investments that go with it. That includes not only the federal funds in response to COVID, but also the beginning of our receipt of the Kerwin dollars, which is helping us to address the historical under-resourcing of our school system. Next slide, please. For district goal number 2, as we think about student wholeness, again, this is intended to be measured by a new measure. And this is derived from a set of student survey questions that are related to student wholeness. So what you see reflected here would be intended to be a composite of what those student responses tell us. And so the target here would be 80%. I also wanted to acknowledge that with this being the first year of administration, one of the things that we are doing is we're starting to educate the entire city schools community around what this measure is. And so we have included in the appendix a breakdown of this particular measure. So Mr. Kennedy, if you wouldn't mind flipping to our appendix slide now. I just wanted to briefly just review and acknowledge that, again, with this being the first time that we are using this particular measure, we have worked to identify the questions on our survey that are most closely connected to student wholeness. What you see noted here is the breakdown of those responses for each of those different questions, as well as the composite of 61%. This measure has now also been shared with schools. So schools are now starting to sort of process, what does this tell them about how their strategies are being experienced by their students? Similarly for central office, as we have been leading various wholeness related efforts. And so again, I also just want to acknowledge, while this is a composite score for purposes of the district goal to allow for focus, there would still be access to this level of detailed information as we move forward. So we recognize that it's really important for folks to understand the pieces of the puzzle, if you will, so that that will be reflected in the communication that is put forward around this performance measurement framework. Mr. Kennedy, we can move back, please. Okay, so just wrapping up on district goal number 2. I also just want to acknowledge that, if, just thinking about each of those different areas, some of them are more specifically tied to specific strategies than others. So again, one of the benefits of looking at them, sort of individually, sort of helps you get a sense around how we're doing in those different areas. Next goal, please. So goal number 3, more students graduating on time. So again, I just want to acknowledge that there's a level of alignment for inclusion of this particular goal with what is used for state and federal accountability. This particular measure is actually calculated by the state. So the state defines it. They handle the calculations of it. And so while we sometimes will have our own internal sort of estimations, we are always very careful to just rely specifically on the state's calculations for purposes of reporting graduation rate. Having said that, again, just most folks are familiar with graduation as one of the hallmarks of success when it comes to K-12 education. I want to just acknowledge that it's not just because that's the end point, but in many cases, it's the starting point for what the future looks like beyond schooling. And so there's been extensive research that continues to demonstrate the positive effects of earning a high school diploma. And that includes a variety of life outcomes. Some of those are health related, economic, so on and so forth, even in terms of community impact and civic engagement. So all of those are reasons that we are proposing that be considered at this time. Also wanted to note that from an accountability perspective, that the determination of the Comprehensive Support and Improvement Schools, which is one of the designations for school improvement under the Every Student Succeeds Act, when it comes to high schools, graduation rate is actually one of the ways that schools get identified as a CSI school, and their improvement can actually allow them to exit that improvement status. So again, there's a level of alignment there, which is part of the reason that this particular goal is being proposed at this time. Next slide, please. So when it comes to how all of this will work together, the idea is that by having the 3 district goals as our focus for purposes of communication and community mobilization, that those goals would still be supported by the additional updates and reporting that is done publicly with the board around our efforts. So when you think about what we report on in committee, particularly around the work of the blueprint and our R3 strategies, and as we share data around updates around different bodies of work, be it around the specific implementation or as we are progress monitoring, there is an ability to then see how the operational goals actually support everything that we're talking about in terms of the district goals. And I also just want to acknowledge, when we talk about the operational goals, that includes not only the work of central office, but the work of schools. So schools also have goals that they work towards as a part of their school performance plans, which will allow there to be a level of alignment across the organization in support of the district goals. Next slide, please. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Chief Hike Hubbard, to sort of talk us through some of our plans as it relates to communication and ongoing stakeholder engagement.
Thank you, Chief Jones, and good evening again, Commissioners, Dr. Santelises. So I'm here today to share how we're going to roll out this information to our stakeholders. I have joined Commissioner Bondima and Chief Jones and the board in several meetings to listen to understand what they'd like to see happen around the rollout of these goals and how we make sure that our stakeholders are bought in, understand it, and can engage with it. So we have a couple quick slides to share we propose around engagement for the goals. First off, in April, We're going to launch our webpage that will have specific components to it. We'll have expandable sections for each measure with family-friendly language that will be without jargon or edu-speak. So it's very clear and plain language and clearly outlines the goals and how we're trying to get there. We will have dashboard-style tools that will be able to be eventually, we're creating a space for that in April, and then a short survey. So when families or staff or partners go to the website to look at these goals and engage with the information, there'll be a short survey there to collect immediate feedback on your impressions with it and how easy it is to use the website that we have available for you. By June, we're going to have the dashboard style tool up and running, available for folks. We're going to create a call to action also for the public support of the goals. We're looking at some kind of literacy campaign for families, for example. How can families help their individual children support our literacy goal that actually results in a higher level of literacy score for the entire district, but focusing it on how a family can support an individual child as an example. We're hoping to have call to action for partners, for teachers, for families, for students around how all of them can actually support the achievement of these goals. We'll also create opportunities to introduce the messaging and how it resonates with our audiences and how the community can support our goals. So ongoing, we'll have the survey webpage that has feedback, plus engage with it. By March or April, we're going to have our youth board forum. We're still working on the final date for that youth board forum. We'll share those goals with those students. In April and May, we want to be able to share the goals from the board goals with ASCBC, CCAC, and PCAB. We have family board forum in May. We also like to share that with. And then ongoing, we have quarterly partner meetings where we bring district partners from across the district together every quarter to talk about what we're doing as a district. We'll be able to share the goals there as well. Next slide, please. So here's how we frame this. April to June is teach or share the information, launch of the website, how we can share information with our stakeholders, community-led meetings, promotion and feedback on with our survey via social media tools, etc., and a video we're going to produce about the goals so folks have a clear messaging about it. So April to June is teaching and messaging. June and beyond is engage. We want to finish our call to action to support community engagement. How can our stakeholders support us in the goals, develop and share actions for the audience to support different grade level cohorts, and we want to share our actions and coordinated marketing efforts through videos, social media, robocalls, influencers, and civic partners. Make sure we're exploring different ways to market our work, marketing events or other collateral materials, and then have paid media and earned media appearances about the district's goals. So that our entire district is on one band, one sound accord for what our goals are and how we're all going to work collaboratively to achieve them. And with that, I'm going to close the presentation. I think we're now have time for questions from the board. Thanks, Chief Jones, for letting me join in.
Thank you to Chief Jones, Chief Highcover, all the staff that participated in the legwork, and certainly to committee members who have been involved, commissioners who've been involved in this process. I'm going to open it up for any questions or comments from my colleagues. Dr. Bondima, and then I'm going to come over to Commissioner Reed.
My comment is very quick. I just want to, again, we've been acknowledging different people for the work that we've been doing. I need to also acknowledge the staff, Baltimore City Public School staff, Chief Teresa Jones and Chief Tina Tyke-Hubbard and her staff, and also deeply thank the committee that worked on this we've been working on it for, what, 2.5, 3 years now? And we're not complete. We still have a lot of work to go. And also our Christian, who has been actively helping. I mean, he's been doing a fantastic job. So right now we've seen some of this work already. Many of our questions have been answered. And I'm pretty much satisfied with the presentation right now. So I'll move it to someone else for questions.
Thank you for your commitment and your leadership, Dr. Bondima, in this process. Commissioner Reed, absolutely.
Yeah, I would like to thank chiefs for their help. Was really instructive to me in the 3x3s. Gave us a chance to distill more and get more granular, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Commissioner Roberts.
Thank you, Vice Chair McFadden. I want to thank staff. I want to thank the staff that Chief High Hubbard and to Chief Lisa Gibson for working with the board very closely during this process. It has not been a short process or easy one, but I also really want to thank all of our school-based staff that work with our students every single day, that make efforts to see meaningful, subjectively meaningful gains every single day. I know that a lot of times in this work, we just look at the numbers, but there's a lot of work that goes into the numbers. And while they may not reflect what we all want to see, I know personally as the mom of a third grade struggling reader, this is not the number that I want to see. And knowing that he's in this count. But I also know that the efforts that go into our buildings every day are in an attempt to move towards this target that we're looking at. And that's why we show up. So I don't want that to be remiss as the numbers are not being reflected as 100% of everyone excelling at this time, or, you know, even in 26, 27, where this target is intended to kind of manifest. Because I think that can get lost in this conversation really quickly. So I kind of wanted to level set that this is hard for all parties involved to look at this baseline, and that no one cares more about the kids of Boston City than the kids that are a part of their lives every day, including their families, including teachers, including us. And so I just wanted to level set that.
Appreciate that, Commissioner Robinson. It makes me just think, I see you, Commissioner Sally, how diverse our school system is, right? And with the support of the village of every child, you know, many of our students and our schools are going to exceed, that's our goal, right? The targets that we're setting. But collectively as a whole, I certainly appreciate and hear what you're saying. But we know that we have rock stars in many different pockets of our city that are going to take these targets, run with them, exceed them, and continue to give us information to inform how we move forward. So I appreciate that. Commissioner Sally?
Yep. Thank you so much. So I think a little bit about what I value tremendously, which is making sure that we're setting up both our educators and our students for success, not only every single day in our buildings, but making sure that life beyond K-12 sets them up for that post-secondary success where they can thrive in our communities, have an opportunity to work, to lead, to join boards like this. And I look at these goals as kind of a starting point for our children. And there's a huge difference between what we see as both the target and then what we see as annual growth for our children. Wanting to make sure that we're thinking a little bit about ensuring that we're putting both ambitious targets in front of our students and in front of our teachers, in front of our leaders, but also making sure in a recognition that there's a significant amount of investments that are being made, both financially from both the federal government, from the states, from state, but also from our teachers who are really going to be the ones helping our students and our parents who are helping our students to get there. I know there's been a tremendous amount of thought put into what these goals look like, but wanting to make sure that when I look at 1.6% and looking at what our baseline is, that this actually reflects the most ambitious target that we could put in front of our children today. Recognizing that, yes, the pandemic has created a huge deficit for our students, but I'd like to recognize that the investments that we have today can do more for our children to put more ambitious targets on our paper than what we see today. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments for our staff? You're good. With that, is there a motion to approve item 8.03?
Yes, thank you. Bandima here. I move to adopt district goals in the areas of literacy, wholeness, and high school success.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second, Robert.
Second by Commissioner Bondima. Any discussion from our committee, from our commissioners? Excuse me. Motion was made by Dr. Bondima, seconded by Commissioner Roberts. Any discussion? All those in favor, Commissioner Bondima,
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks,
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin,
Yes.
Commissioner Horwitz, yes, Commissioner Horwitz.
Sorry, yes.
Commissioner Reed,
Yes.
Commissioner Roberts,
Yes.
Commissioner Sally,
No.
Commissioner Richardson, Chair Richardson.
Yes.
I'm in favor. That is 8 in favor with 1 no and 1 absence. The motion passes.
Great job, Doc.
Nicely done. Nicely done, team. And thank you, Commissioner Bondine.
Everyone. Okay, we have a couple presentations. First, I want to go to the proposed academic calendar for school year 22-23. If the staff rep doing that presentation could. Yeah, there you all are. Hello.
Hello, hello, good evening. Thank you. I'm Joan Dabrowski, Chief Academic Officer. I'll be joined this evening by my colleague, Ms. Aquila James, the Director of Academic Strategy. We're pleased to share a proposal with the board on the proposed academic calendar for school year 2022-2023. All right, if we go to the next slide, please. So an overview for how we'll spend our time. We want to talk a little bit about how we're thinking of our calendar in this space of Reimagine. We know that we have MSD requirements that we need to represent in our calendar. We're going to highlight the stakeholder engagement process, and then we will bring to you our proposal. Next slide, please. So as always, all the work that we do aligns with the strategic priorities of our board. In this particular instance, you'll see that priority 1 and priority 7 are the aligned strategies this evening. And as always, as we've seen earlier tonight, we are anchored in our work of Reconnect, Restore, Reimagine. So as we think about our proposed calendar and how it supports our key strategies, these are things that guide our work and inform our processes. On this next slide, you'll see again the way in which we think about our calendar and the ways in which our calendar can support the very important activities that lie within our strategies, again, in service of our student learning plan. So I hope you're feeling some alignment as we're sharing different types of presentations, but sort of our common goals around our approach to academic recovery. And so with that, in the next slide, you're going to see some important priorities that are reflected in this proposal this evening. First and foremost, we have heard from so many of our stakeholders, all of our stakeholders, about the importance of wellness. And when we think about wellness, we think about how we spend time taking care of ourselves in different ways. So you'll see things in our proposal about where wellness might allow time for colleagues to have sort of a meeting-free block of time where you can work in your classrooms or work in your offices and do that personal work that has to get done, knowing that you won't be called into a meeting. Wellness might also be having an opportunity for staff to be together, having some type of facilitation or professional learning anchored around self-care. Wellness might also be an opportunity where we are not in session, and so you're going to see some of these things represented in the proposal. Another important priority is how we use our early release days to support those key initiatives. We heard from multiple stakeholder groups the importance of meaningful parent-teacher conferences, and especially when we're in this space of talking about student learning plans, the opportunity for that parent-teacher engagement feels particularly important right now. And as always, we continue to want to share a calendar that reflects strategic and frequent opportunities for professional learning. So on the next slide, I just want to try to piece together some other aspects of how we are reimagining calendar. So tonight, you're going to hear some of the important technical updates that we are required to bring to our board and bring to the public annually as part of an MSD compliance experience. However, we are also taking into account that calendar has space for this Reimagine work, and so some of these things have been reflected in our approach to our summer learning. So at a recent Teaching and Learning Committee, we shared our new way of thinking about some school-based programs occurring this summer that really represent an extended school year. And so while they're not represented in this MSD calendar experience, they are happening and they do represent how we are broadening this idea of a reimagined calendar. I'm also really excited that as part of this process, we have heard from many educators, some of our teachers and some of our school leaders who've been a part of this process, that they're interested in thinking about what a full year calendar might look like. And so we're going to be mobilizing a work group to explore that more fully as we think about school year 23-24. And then the last thing I want to share before I pass this off to my colleague is that I'm always mindful of some of the language and some of the educational jargon that we hear in these presentations. So I wanted to do a little bit of a glossary for us. So we talk a lot about student learning plans. You'll notice that we now we love a good acronym, so it's an SLP. Parent-teacher conferences, you might see PTC. Professional development, again, if you hang around in schools a lot, you'll hear people talk about PD. It just kind of rolls off the tongue, but I want to just name that here. And then certainly this importance of wellness days. I think the pandemic has really revealed the importance of our wellness. And as I mentioned, how wellness can show up in different ways. So with that, I would like to again extend a welcome to my colleague, Ms. Aquila James, who will bring us through the rest of the presentation.
Thank you kindly, Dr. Dabrowski. It's a pleasure to be in your presence. And so in addition to adhering to the information that was just shared with respect to the build of the calendar, there are some state and local calendar requirements. And I have to say, these requirements include a minimum of about 180 instructional days. They also include a set number of hours in order to ensure that they are counted as one full instructional day. And they certainly observe the time frame of Monday through Fridays to not include Saturdays, Sundays, or holidays. In addition to state requirements include COMAR, observed holidays, some of the holidays that you might normally associate with federal holidays, but there are some differences. So if you take a peek here, you might notice that the Friday before Easter and through Monday are days that COMAR provides guidance for us to ensure we are adhering to observing that day, coupled with that primary and general election days, as well as Juneteenth. In addition to state and local, we certainly want to partner with our BTU collective bargaining agreement, ensuring that all of our teachers have a minimum of 10 professional learning days or professional development activities. Next slide. And so I have to say, this is probably what has been one of the most enjoyable parts in building our calendar is that stakeholder engagement. I certainly enjoyed engaging folks virtually, in person, as well as through just the overall stakeholder surveys, all for the need for us to increase an understanding of the knowledge and attitudes, as well as perspectives, perceptions, and even folks' interests, as well as experience related to the school calendar. We were really intentional about being able to engage with as many folks as possible. Next slide, please. And so the list of stakeholders that you see here included all of the folks that we engage, as well as folks that we plan to engage. But more specifically, I just want to call out, we were able to collaborate with our school principals. School principals really took the time to give and provide feedback as to what was important to them. And then we also was able to build on an initiative that we started earlier this year when we developed that R3 work, which was a group of educators that we consider our educator consultancy group. We were able to collaborate with that teacher group, teachers that raised their hands, that meaning that ed consultant group that raised their hands to say, I want to be a part of professional development. I want my voice to be heard and to be considered as we think in terms of professional development. And because the calendar build includes that component, we wanted to make sure that we tapped into the folks that raised their hand on our ed consultancy group to be a part of that focus group. And so they were able to meet and express what their desires would be. And so some of the desires that both principals and our educators expressed was the need to have more time to complete the operational and instructional tasks, ensure that strategic and aligned professional development was available, coupled with flexibility and time to conduct parent-teacher conferences. I am smiling because I'm thinking about that next group that's listed right under teacher and staff, and that's our Associate Student Congress of Baltimore City. I personally thoroughly enjoyed meeting with them, and I would be remiss if I didn't share their strong and very persuasive feedback from our scholars that included that we include them in our wellness days. And they define that how we include them is we can demonstrate that by having no homework on wellness days. And so that was really, really fun for me. Again, the stakeholder survey that was issued with amongst our community resulted in about 6,500 respondents, ranking the most critical aspect of next year's calendar as fewer early release days and more parent-teacher conference days. And so while we've met with almost all of the stakeholders, we do have one more group that we want to make sure we ascertain their feedback and as we think in terms of providing the best calendar build for our next upcoming school year. Next slide, please. All right, so let's dig in and share with you the proposed calendar. So this year, up and coming, we hope to bring our educators back 4 days in advance, which we would start them off on August the 23rd. School would begin on August the 29th, and then there will be a Thanksgiving break. That break will include the November 23rd through the 25th. We'll talk a little bit about the 23rd shortly, coupled with that winter break for December the 23rd through January the 2nd. Spring break, of course, we're going to honor what COMAR provides for us. And so at this time, the proposal is April the 3rd through the 10th. I want to just draw your attention to the school end. School for student will end on June the 13th. That will be a half a day for students. We'll share that a little bit later. You'll see it again. And a full day for our teachers. And so while we met with our teacher focus group, it was important that we included their voice. Their voice said, we need additional time to unpack our rooms. And so a teacher actually recommended what you see before you. That is a half a day for students and a full day for teachers. And so that's what you have. For inclement weather recovery days, outlined are June 14th through the 16th, coupled with that June 20th through the 21st. As we shared earlier, the June 19th is an observed holiday, so we will not include that day for recovery. I just want to give just a quick little nugget around our inclement weather days is that our principals, as well as district office members, and certainly our educators, they shared with us this wondering around, can we operate on using inclement weather days as a remote learning? And we're going to talk about that momentarily as well. But I'm telling you, stakeholder feedback was key to the build of this proposal. Next slide, please. So here you have before you our holiday observation. So it just gives you a moment to see exact days that schools are closed and the district days are closed. And so again, if I could just draw your attention, when it comes to election day, our schools are closed and our district office, it will be open. For Thanksgiving break, we're going to definitely honor that November the 23rd through the 25th for both schools as well as for district office. And then when we take a peek at the winter break, things look a little different for the district office, but you could certainly see that there are some similarities, but yet some differences differences. Another difference that I'd like to bring to your attention includes the spring break. For district office, it's a little different, and for our schools will be off again April the 3rd through April the 10th. And then, of course, we'll continue to celebrate in our own way Memorial Day as well as Juneteenth, coupled with Independence Day and Labor Day. All right. Next slide. Wellness days, another great one. The purpose of wellness days is, as Dr. Dabrowski so eloquently said, it's to support our overall city school staff. And what that looks like, it could be very different. I want you to take a peek real quick at what's before you. November 23rd and December the 23rd are days that are a full day off. And what we're doing is we're identifying those as wellness days. Full day wellness days that we can only imagine that a lot of our educators, school leaders, principals, even district office staff will probably take that before Thanksgiving Day and do some traveling, whatever they choose. But these are the full day off for wellness days. When we think about other wellness days in our calendar, we have aligned these wellness days to our early release, and we're going to share that momentarily. And these are the days in which we really want our staff to capitalize on completing that operational work that sometimes they don't get a moment or a chance during their traditional work hour days to do. And so these are all in support of wellness days. Those wellness days are January 11th, March 17th, and June the 7th. Next slide, please. Our early release dates for students. On the right side, you'll actually see the list, but I do want to just share that these early release days are designed to support our educators in the completion of that core work, their professional learning. If professional development is taking place, they should engage. Also to protect time for our schools, lead our school educators to complete their student learning plans. Last year, this current year, we heard from our educators and were very responsive. And so what you see here on the calendar is what we learned, that folks require time. During our stakeholder feedback, folks mentioned again, we need time to complete the strategies within our R3 that has been outlined. And so if you take a peek with me, on October 5th, there's a parent-teacher conference day that is set aside some time for that. November the 2nd, there's student learning plans, which folks will have a half a day to use to complete those student learning plans, to really engage our parents and to make sure that they are aware of what the goals might be or how to define the goals for their dollar, and also to make sure that they're in touch with the student themselves. December 14th, January 11th is another Wellness Day. March the 8th is Parent-Teacher Conference. And of course, May 17th and June 7th is a Wellness Day. June 13th is the last day. Again, this was a recommendation that was from one of our educators, and the recommendation was to include a half a day for students. So that's why you have the June the 13th day here as our early release days. Next slide, please. Parent-teacher conferences. So our stakeholder feedback, our parents, as well as our educators, they certainly said, hey, we want more time to engage and discuss how the progress of our children. And so the district has provided and designated very specific days for our teams to engage in that work. That's October the 5th, as well as on March the 8th. Again, you saw this day on our half-day early release list, and so we have that here. And we also wanted to be very responsive to the feedback to requests for more. And so we are encouraging schools to leverage that December 14th and that May 17th early release days in order to connect with parents as needed. Something that I want to just share is that during our stakeholder feedback, or our stakeholder engagement, I should say, there was intentionality around the recommendation to ensure that parent-teacher conference were scheduled in alignment with progress reports so that parents would be able to use use that information, i.e. progress reports, as they engage in understanding how to better support or continue to support their students. Another area that I want to just highlight is that we're also in support of the use of virtual platforms to support connections with our families. Our teachers made it very clear to us that sometimes our families are available in the evening time and they appreciate the use of the virtual platforms. And so we are able to support that initiative as well. Next slide, please. Okay, our professional development days. And so here's a list of the professional development days that we will engage in this upcoming year, should this be approved. And that is, again, those 4 days at the beginning of the school year. We want to ensure that schools have an opportunity to have their own school-specific professional development as well as district systemic professional development. We will continue to observe the BTU Pizzazza-sponsored October 14th PD, coupled with other professional development dates that are listed here. I want to just draw your eye to that November the 9th date. That is a date that we are very much committed to ensuring that we support our educators to the best of our ability with structured time to engage in the completion of the student learning plans and to really connect with our students, to connect with our parents, and ensuring that the completion of that student learning plan is the result of all folks at the table making the determination for goals for the individual pupils. When we look at our January 23rd, that's a date that's right after our quarter dates. And you'll notice that that day is intentional in order to, again, support our teachers with additional structured time in order to engage in the operational tasks such as completion of grades as well as professional development. February 17th, March 17th, and April the 21st. March 17th is a systemic day that we will again support with respect to wellness, in which we will offer half a day systemic PD to ensure that we leave time and space for our educators to continue to support themselves in the area of wellness. Next slide, please. Our quarter dates, it was really important for us to just share with you that we've really thought this through in collaboration with the folks that were listed on that engagement slide. And so our quarter dates include equal amount of dates for each quarter to allow the students the maximum amount of time to demonstrate their learning. Next slide. Our progress report dates also show that right in the middle of our quarter report card time is just that nice little stopping point where it will allow for opportunity to engage in parent-teacher conference, and more importantly, our restart. If a student has fallen behind, they have another opportunity at that progress report time to say, let me change my approach to engaging in learning. Next slide, please. All right, and as Dr. Dabrowski shared earlier, we are reimagining summer learning. I appreciate what summer school is doing as it thinks in terms of offering school-specific summer school sites, and also the idea around exploring a full year calendar option. I am very excited about that. While engaging with principals both in our traditional schools as well as in our charter, it was very clear that there are folks that are really interested in understanding how we can recover and use an extended year, a full year calendar to do so. And earlier you heard me mention on the very first slide that listed our instructional dates is this idea around how do we or can we use inclement weather days or operate remotely. At this time, it was important for us, I should say, to investigate, to listen and learn and to hear and then advocate. And what we learned is that the state will provide us guidance with respect to remote learning. So the request did not fall on deaf ears, but it's certainly a decision that is currently at the state level. And so we are in time just working to make sure that we are able to meet that need once the state makes that decision. All righty. And this concludes our presentation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much to the team for presenting this. I'm going to open it up to colleagues and commissioners for any questions or thoughts. Commissioner Griffin.
Thank you so much for this presentation. It was very thorough. I want to say that I really do appreciate the amount of work that it takes to make a district-wide school calendar with all the constraints, all the requirements, all the dates, all the PD, and now wellness days, aligning it with our progress reports and our report cards and all of those moving parts. I just want to recognize that first before I say anything else, because it is a lot of work. My main thought that popped up when I was reading this presentation was around the wellness days. And one, I want to say thank you for putting the wellness days, 2 of them, right at the start of the bookend of a holiday. I know what it feels like to try to run out of a school right before Thanksgiving to buy all your groceries because you did not have time to be a person before a holiday comes, or to get yourself ready to travel if you travel out of town to visit your family. And so that day, I can say that I know I would feel grateful for that day. And I know we heard a lot of feedback from our educators and our school staff around that this year even. A question I have is, in thinking about how the rest of the wellness days will be used, I know that putting an SLP, like dedicating some time on what we're calling a wellness day on that date, sounds like a good idea, but I don't want us to bump into a wall where we're starting to assign wellness days with actual actions or tasks or transactions that have to be done for the district. Because this is me speaking personally now. For me, that would not feel necessarily like wellness. So I am curious if that was specific feedback you received from your educator groups, that this was something they actually did want or liked. Because we have also received some feedback around wellness days and how some of the activities that are on those days, somebody's calling, were specifically assigned. Hold on. Okay, there we go. They're going to have to call back. But there were opportunities for some school leaders to assign tasks on those wellness days. And I know we got a lot of feedback from our educators like, hold on now, don't take my wellness days. I just don't want us to bump into that same wall. So I'm curious about like where this notion came from.
Well, I'll start, and certainly Chief Dabrowski and Aquila, you should join in. So I think there's a couple of points, and they certainly should speak to the feedback that they received from the current focus groups. But I do, for a point of historical accuracy, want to point out that when we made the decision to institute the wellness days, it was after talking with teachers on the ground last fall in the midst, and there were 2 major themes. The first theme was, I actually do need time to get work done. We never said at the onset that wellness was only for personal time. So I think it's a historical point of clarification that may have been muddied along the way, just as normal life and telephone and how people recollect. But I was very clear that the 2 themes we were addressing was, 1, teachers who were saying the deluge of other pieces, including SLP, is weighing in on my wellness because it's too much, right? It's a lot. So one response was, how do we take some of that off the plate, just period? And 2, how do we give more time built in for teachers to actually have time during the day to complete that so they're not lugging work home? Now, I know I'm old, but I remember one of the most stressful parts of teaching when I was in Brooklyn and Bed-Stuy was all I had to lug home and do at 11, 12 midnight. So that was one piece. The other piece was absolutely, Commissioner Griffin, to address just time for self. We never said at the onset of this that wellness days were solely for that time for self. From the onset, it was already a combination. Now, whether that got conflated for some folks along the way, I give that because, you know, we communicate across 10,000 people. I do think it's important for Aquila and Dr. Joan to also speak to what they heard now. But again, I just wanted to make that point of clarification. We came up with that. It was based on those themes early on. We never said, well, all wellness days are used the same, and all those wellness days are only for personal time off. Aquila, you might want to address, you and Dr. D might want to address the current themes you heard.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Kelsey, did you go?
Sure. No, I was just going to say one thing, and I think Dr. Santalisa is for that historical piece. I think one of the things, and then I'll definitely have Aquila weigh in, is we did, as we tried to plan for this, think about how to be more clear and have more notice. Because one of the things we heard is to make sure that
just getting it ready.
Oh. We wanted to make sure that that folks had lead time and to know what those days would be. The other piece that we really wanted to get tighter around was this notion of wellness for schools and central office. So I think we're also trying to honor that. And then I think the last piece, which we signaled, linking those to the Thanksgiving and winter breaks, signals also for our students and families. And so I think that was part of some of the shifts we tried to make to support more clarity this year. I'm sorry, for the year ahead. But please, Aquila, add more.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate the question. As it relates to educators and principals, they certainly included wellness for just time. We just need more time to complete tasks. And so the wellness days were carved out with that in mind, and it's actually a push for us to say, hey, here is some designated time for you to do just that, whatever it is that you need to do, rather it is the completion of your grades. Here you are, you're in your building. We're not calling you out of your building for a meeting, but you're in your building, you're able to complete those tasks. And even for the full days, certainly, like you mentioned, that is for your leisure to travel or do what you need to do. But teachers were very, very specific around the request for more time complete task. And the request actually said uninterrupted time. And so I believe that is in the spirit of wellness. That is exactly what we're offering. Respectfully, if I could just note that the wellness days that are listed here don't include a request to look at SLP completion. There's a different request on other early release days to think in terms of other academic activities or tasks that has been assigned, if you will, for other early release days. But again, that wellness day is to allow our educators the designated structured time where it's uninterrupted for you to engage in what you need to engage in. And sometimes at the district level or even at the school level, that might mean that our outstanding wholeness team is ushering us through opportunities for us to know how to engage in self-care. And so it could take on a different approach. But by all means, this time is the request or the feedback was all about time, uninterrupted time. Hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you all. You all definitely answered my question and some more that I would have asked. So I love the preemptive answers that you all gave. And thank you for pointing out the difference between the days that are marked specifically for SLPs or parent-teacher conferences and the ones that are marked for wellness. I missed that. So I want to make sure that we flag that so that that's over-communicated to our folks. Because I know I'm doing like a reading and trying to dig into the presentation, but just thinking about what does communication of this look like early and often so that folks know the difference between these days and who has onus of those days really too, because that's been a question as well. But this is great, and thank you so much for answering my questions.
One thing that I know that I've been hearing from teachers and school leaders is the time, as you all are mentioning, around not just the development of the student learning plans, but professional learning around the implementation of those. How are they monitoring those? So I know that that's certainly, weedy, and not going to get into that, but just being mindful of that in the calendar development process, right? How are we using the days in August? How are we using those, because if the concept is to not allow those plans to die and go away year by year, right? That plan should be traveling with that student from grade level to grade level, from school to school, perhaps. Most teachers should have those plans during the summer or as students are transitioning, to the next grade or the next year. So how are we using time throughout the summer, perhaps, or in August, perhaps, to kind of prep teachers to get ahead, maybe even a roadmap for student learning plans for the course of the year, right, as an idea. A timeline. This is where we should be by October, or this is where we should be. And that could give school leaders some, a skeleton to kind of help them in the process of monitoring those plans and making sure that our young people are actually meeting with success with the plans that we're sitting down to create for each of them. I think is important, but that is something that I've been hearing. I know several of the other commissioners have been hearing, from teachers and from school leaders. The idea of the student learning plans are great, right? But how do we, become very strategic in making sure that we allot the right amount of time, not only to develop them, but to implement them, and then to assess whether or not those plans are working so that we can come back to the table and move forward the next year, hopefully. And then certainly meet these goals that we just voted on tonight.
Yep, that's great feedback, Commissioner McFadden. And I'll just add, so we have a teacher consultants group that also is working on the SLPs to provide that ongoing. And I think your suggestions and ideas around building out guidance for sort of year 2 of the SLPs. And we certainly have heard from our colleagues about ways or ideas for improvement. So I take all of that to heart as we're trying to build out, like what you said, that roadmap for SLPs. So that's helpful.
Any additional questions from board colleagues?
Yes, this is Commissioner Brooks. I was just trying to get a point of when would we expect an update about the SLP plans, since we've had would have been a year. I'm just trying to get curious about when we will expect a formal presentation for the board, and then to talk about in May, Christian?
Yep, I was going to say early May.
Okay. So, and so in that, is there any, I think what would be useful for me sort of going into that space is to be really thinking about what data is it revealing to us, right? So not just the creation of those plans, but what's the outcome? And maybe it's maybe we need a process outcome. I don't think we'll actually have a full outcome yet as to sort of the results of these plans. But I would love to have a sense of what our educators are thinking, what their experiences have been, sort of managing, as Commissioner McFadden talked about, implementing those plans, and then any insights around sort of how we're going to improve and streamline that process for year 2. And also, can we get a report, a timeline? Because I know that schools had at different time points to sort of have the SLPs completed. I know that my nephew, his school, it was much later in the year. I thought they would all be rolled out at the same time, but I'd love to have a sense of if we're going to use that same strategy or approach moving forward into year 2.
I just want to make sure you heard that question, Chief Dabrowski.
Yep, no, I was just writing a few notes. So certainly, I think we do have, and I think we did share sort of the timelines around dates, but we can certainly bring that back to the board. We do have another comprehensive R3 update, I think, scheduled for early May. We continue to do our surveys with our teachers, so we'll have end of year feedback to be certainly able to bring to the board again. And we have been asking about student learning plans, particularly around how that implementation is going, where are things going well, the successes, what are the challenges, where for the improvements, but certainly we'll include that in our next update with the board. But in the meantime, we can provide all of the guidance we've already shared with our schools about timelines for when and how those student learning plans are shared with families. And I think we did share sort of our completion rates, and sort of that has been part of the process. We've been trying to, again, monitor right now that completion rate, and we've really been working with schools to help work through the obstacles. This is a brand new sort of initiative in terms of a robust way of sitting and developing these. So we want to, again, really honor the input around the time it takes to do this and be reflective of how we can improve. Thank you. I see Casey Mangle has put into the chat. We do update on May 3rd. We'll have an update for SLPs and then the full board on May 10th. So thank you for that.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Dabrowski.
Yes.
Commissioner Griffin.
I just have one more thing, and I know it doesn't necessarily fit here, but I would love for it to be a thought. And in the future, I think I would just love to see some kind of survey or feedback around experiences this year with it. And it's because I've been getting some, like some teachers have reached out to me about their experiences with the surprise observations or the unscheduled observations, the ones that happen, they're the formal observation, but they didn't know it was going to happen on that day. And so just thinking about how that fits into this too, like where do observations normally happen in the calendar year? What's going on around that time? Is there like, are there PDs happening around that time? Is there anything else, testing? Is there anything else that would cause like higher anxiety or higher movement in a school while you're also possibly having these formal observations? So I just want to flag that. And I would love to see some feedback or information around like how those observations went this year versus when we've had them scheduled. Just something I would like to see. Yes.
Sure, so we can flag that for the human capital team, specifically just Papia, given her role in the evaluation, the evaluation process from a human capital standpoint. And I think, I'm not sure actually, but we can check on when that next update would be coming before the board anyway, and include that in. So I'll just ask Chief Perkins Cohen to make sure that we get that to the human capital team. I don't know who's on now. Oh, there's Sarah. So we've got enough people on. Sarah, do you want to chime in?
Not now, but I will be happy to take this and certainly follow up.
I love honesty. Yeah, no, not now, but we'll come back to you with it.
Jess really is the right person, so I certainly don't want to misspeak.
Okay, no, I thought it would be Jess. So, well, if you could flag that for her, Sarah, and then what we can do is include that, make sure it's included in the next update to the board around where we are with the evaluation process.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to the team. Thanks for the discussion, colleagues. Thank you so much. And we have all of our follow-ups noted by all members of our staff tonight. So thank you. We have 2 additional presentations tonight for information and discussion. Next, we will now hear an information item on policy KCD, public gifts and donations. This is first reader.
Good evening. My name is Monique Sims. I want to say good evening to our commissioners, Dr. Santelises, the public, and welcoming you to this evening to share more about the Public Gifts and Donations Policy KCD. This policy is positioned within the Office of Communications, Engagement, and Enrollment, and so its implementation sits there. I'm joined this evening by Chief Hike Hubbard and members of the cross-collaborative team whose work has helped to shape the content of this presentation. And specifically, I'd like to name Chief Hike Hubbard again, Chief Sivan, Chief Doherty, and Mr. Desabe, and Corinne Delaberto, and a host of other contributors who contributed to this presentation tonight and the work to date. So as a point of the agenda, just want to say that we prepared the presentation in 3 parts, particularly wanting to share some highlights and background information about the policy and what we've learned and how that information has helped to shape the proposed revisions. We'll talk a little bit more about the considerations being made, as well as some of the public feedback and that we've been considering through this process. Certainly here, just want to identify that these revisions and what we're working toward today is connected to these particular priorities of the board, just recognizing that this policy and its regulations help to support community with making making meaningful contributions to our schools and students through the provision of products, services, and other in-kind support in an equitable and inclusive manner, also leveraging district and school supports. In considering the purpose of this policy, we wanted to acknowledge that the role that fundraising activities and gifts and donations play in advancing our district and schools. And it's why we propose that the renaming of this policy include the term fundraising or the content for fundraising, in addition to public gifts and donations, to expand the scope of the policy to be more inclusive of two complementary processes that we hope will yield a more comprehensive plan for support. Since the last time this policy was revised back in fall of 2019, we've observed and experienced a lot in the implementation of this policy, and have since generated new understandings for what we hope to address in these revisions. And some things that we wanted to highlight in terms of lessons learned, particularly the impact of the pandemic, certainly. We've had an outpouring of interest from our broader community in making contributions, whether it be from books or PPE or other items. And so we really wanted to make sure that these standards of acceptance were updated in this policy revision. We also have expanded our community school strategy. You know, initially we were at 50 community schools in 2019, and now we're upwards of 130. And that strategy includes the community school coordinators who serve as resource development personnel in the schools. And so we want to make sure that we provided support to them in the work that they're doing. We also acknowledge that we formed a central office support team who have also provided support to donation review and acceptance. And you'll see the term Gift Acceptance Committee later on, where we've looked to codify this group and continuing their efforts to provide support. We've placed a lot of emphasis on capacity building efforts and building out more training and communications to build the capacity of not only our school staff, but also our donors, and just working together to facilitate fundraising activities and donation offers. Particularly, we wanted to acknowledge a strategic partnership we formed with Donors Choose to support our teachers and classroom and school-based staff in facilitating crowdfunding activities to further build out supplemental resources for their school-based projects. Here we'll just acknowledge a little bit more about Donors Choose and why we've identified them as our preferred platform for crowdfunding. They certainly are the most trusted platform for teachers and school-based staff alike to request resources. And this Donors Choose organization, they do a lot to take on the administrative burden of getting the items that teachers are looking for, but also shipping them to the school, doing the stewardship and acknowledgements to the donors. And so we really appreciate them and the partnership with what they've been able to provide. Just wanted to highlight a little bit more about the partnership and what we've experienced to date. So since about 2007, we've been in partnership with them. And to date, we've raised, in terms of crowdfunding supports, more than $7.5 million of products and resources to support our classrooms, which is amazing. This work has supported more than 3,800 teachers, and most of the donors actually are outside of Maryland, which is out to elevate and build more visibility to the district and the things that schools are looking for to supplement activities in the buildings. On the right, you'll see some of the top schools that have generated resources through Donors Choose. And what we've experienced even since February, we've increased the number of schools, we've increased the number of teachers and projects that have been on this platform, and really are doing more to build out the capacity so that more schools and more teachers have access to supplemental resources through Donors Choose. So as we think about the goals here, the big thing that we want to acknowledge is that we want to create additional systems and structures to be better prepared to support schools in their resource development offerings. We want to better communicate what our expectations are around the acceptable practices for donations and fundraising, both internally and externally, and ensuring that we are creating the environments that support all students and having the best learning experience. So first, when we think about some of the things we've put forward in the policy, just a few key terms that you'll see, and most of which are related to fundraising, since that's the newest content that's within the policy. We also identified some pieces related to donations requirements to ensure that there are more standards put forward to help people make decisions about what is an acceptable offering and just how to work together around these items. So as you'll see, these are some terms that we've added more into the policy. When we think about the policy, we've also put forward a few standards, namely, again, around mostly fundraising. But we first wanted to make sure that we had a way to identify how this policy would be applied, particularly when we think about some of the policies that are related to the fundraising and gifts and donations. Some of them are listed here. In addition, there are also a call out to our student participation in fundraising activities and making sure that we've named them as a key stakeholder group in facilitating donation and fundraising activities for their schools. Also identifying that grants and donations are a thing that we need to distinguish. We've experienced where our schools and others have asked about supports for donations that they're being offered that are coming by way of grants, particularly from corporate and other foundation organizations. And so we just wanted to name in the policy that, what our tax status is and how to get support when there might be a fiscal sponsorship that's needed, for example, for the grant to be implemented. It was also important that we acknowledge how donations could be declined. We received a lot of offers, and it wasn't always clear how best we could negotiate if something didn't exactly fit an immediate need. And so we wanted to make sure that we did identify this so that our donors also understood that there may be times where the donation would not be able to be accepted if it didn't meet the standards of acceptance, but that they would have a process through which to be notified if this were to occur. We also took into account a number of board rules that we wanted to put forward in this policy. And so you'll see this one here, but a few others coming later that we just wanted to migrate into the policy to ensure that there was continuity in the approach to implementation. So we've identified here that there are some standards around games of chance and gambling, particularly activities like raffles and bingo that schools might use to raise funds, that there are some particular stipulations around how those activities can be enacted. Also, we wanted to share more about our support of the broader community and putting forth a standard around our participation in fundraising activities for other charitable purposes. So for example, the United Way campaign is something that the district certainly supports, and individual schools also engage in other national fundraising activities. And so we just wanted to demonstrate that we do have a standard around our activities for other charitable purposes. In terms of the actual guidelines and how this policy will be implemented, we thought it was really important to put forward identify the coordination and oversight that will be offered through this. And so naming principals identified at the school level to provide oversight to those activities at the individual schools, and then naming the chief of staff acting as a CEO designee for fundraising activities at the district level so that our department leads also had a point of contact to better build coordination around their fundraising efforts to ensure that there's continuity in our approach at schools and at the district level. We wanted to make sure also that there were promotional material guidelines, and again, another incorporation of a board rule here that would just put some guardrails around how we promote fundraising activities, particularly those that might be organized by external groups, to ensure that there is language that is approved that all would use in their fundraising activities. It was important here that we incorporated these other board rules as just examples of fundraising activities that would be supported at the school level, and ensuring that our principals understood that they have a place, one, to approve these types of activities, but also the support that could be offered if they were interested in taking part in these activities and being able to engage with the gift acceptance committee that we'll talk about later to be able to facilitate these types of activities. We put a lot of effort in identifying the guidelines for online fundraising. Like we explained earlier, Donors Choose being identified as our preferred platform, but then acknowledging that there's other platforms that schools and individuals might be interested in, things like Adopt a Classroom, GoFundMe, and others could be used. And so whether we wanted, recognizing that those other platforms, the individual might assume some level of risk in being a part of those, we wanted to put forward that the gift acceptance committee could be engaged by that principal for support in utilizing another platform outside of the Donors Choose platform. We also put forward here some updates around accepting donations and public gifts. And just as a reminder that there is a process for donations that come through that are $5,000 or more. But there are times where we've actually experienced or had a concern around missing a particular donation because of the timelines that we have currently within the policy for donation approval and acceptance. So in instances where we might have one board meeting in a month, or we've gotten an offer from a donor that kind of falls outside of the submission window, we've at times risked missing out on that opportunity. And we wanted to put forward something here that would kind of safeguard us from doing that, whereby the CEO, since she has regular engagement with the board, and we can create a process that will allow her to accept the offerings that we have in conference with the board during a regular part of their regular engagement, so that we don't miss out on opportunities that we feel are beneficial to the school and or district. We also want to name here the importance of stewardship of donations, because we are really big on managing relationships and ensuring that our donors know that they are appreciated and a part of the team and making strong contributions to the school. And so we do have a standard process for acknowledgement. We also are recommending to schools ways that they can recognize their donors in a way that's very consistent. And then acknowledging that stewardship is a thing that we really want to call out and identify that there is a way for us to move donations through a process in a way that is acceptable to the donor and is respectful for their offering. We labeled here a few standards of acceptance that we really want to beef up in terms of guidance, so that we can make better decisions about how we accept certain things. And again, really being transparent about what is acceptable. So we just identified here that books and educational games, beautification projects, things like that certainly could be offered, and that we are really putting a lot of effort through our teams that that these things can be offered, and that there will be standards put forward that folks could use to make decisions about how best to move these forward. We also wanted to acknowledge that the team, as I mentioned earlier, finance, communications and engagement, equity, and schools will come together regularly to review this policy and ensure that its implementation matches the intent that we put forward here, and really being supportive to schools and districts who are really looking forward to using fundraising activities in a way that will support their programs. And so I'm really excited to have this team named here, and their work will continue because it's already offered currently. And so now I just wanted to talk a little bit about the feedback we've received and just acknowledge where we've made some updates. And so particularly there was a call out around the policy and how we're distinguishing between grants and donations, and how if a school needed fiscal sponsorship to implement a particular grant, like what process would they go through to get support. And so we've just named here that the Office of Finance and Communications and Engagement will be a great mechanism to be able to get that support, particularly through our Gifts and Acceptance Committee. And so we just wanted to offer that as a follow-up so that, folks understood that there was support for their efforts in seeking out grants. We also acknowledged and included in the policy standard around student participation in fundraising that our student clubs are organizations that certainly can participate in activities related to fundraising. So we know that there are certain organizations that students might be a part of where they're looking to supplement resources for their organization as well. And so with the approval of the school leader and in alignment with policy JJA, certainly going to support our student organizations in being able to fundraise on behalf of their organization or other organizations that they might be aligned to. When we think about other agencies that specialize in fundraising, we just wanted to call out our connection and relationship with the Fund for Educational Excellence, and they serve as a coordinating body and supporter of the fundraising activity of the district. But we also know that schools have parent organizations, alumni associations, and other boards that support them in their fundraising. So we know that that exists, but we also want to make sure that this policy is supportive to schools that may not have those entities in place. And so the Gift Acceptance Committee, again, will be a great place for school leaders to engage with to make sure that they have the support that they need if they seek to move forward with fundraising activities. As we've talked about some of the board rules that we've incorporated here, we just want to acknowledge that this one in particular for contests and celebrations and other types of things is really about the school having a choice in who they wish to partner with, and acknowledging that some organizations might not meet the standards of acceptance for schools to engage in partnership with around contests for students and things. But it is not about students participating on their own with some of these kinds of contests and celebrations to raise funds for their own scholarships or things like that. And so we just wanted to make that distinction between how this rule would be applied at the school level. We also heard through feedback that, what does it look like for if a school chooses not to use Donors Choose for their crowdfunding, and what kind of support is available. And as I explained earlier, the Gifts and Donations Committee certainly is that group that schools can receive support from if they choose to use other platforms for online fundraising. We acknowledge that when the CEO has her regular engagement with the board chair and vice chair, that's our way of saying there will be a regular communication flow to ensure that in those extenuating circumstances, like we've talked about, certain donation offerings wouldn't get missed. And then lastly, we didn't recommend a compliance report for this particular policy because we offer regular reports to the board by way of the gifts and donations report that happens at every public board meeting. And so that will be used as a standard way of communicating about how this policy is being implemented. But also we acknowledge that the gift acceptance committee annually would take a look at the policy and ensure that things, anything need to be revised, that we would bring it to the board for discussion. This is just a bit of a summary of some of the other feedback we've received. There's certainly more to be gathered, and particularly from our principals and teachers and students, we want to really hear from them. So that's the work that we're doing currently. But again, this is just a summary of kind of what we've heard from in community, that some of our coordinating organizations, like our community school lead agencies, they do a lot of work to leverage funds on behalf of their schools in the district, and just wanting to acknowledge them a little bit more in the work that they're doing, and offer more coordination so that we're not in conflict with the ask that we're making publicly, and just demonstrating more coordinated support around the fundraising activities between schools. Also making sure that we're clarifying just how this applies to different schools. So particularly when we're thinking about charters, they have oftentimes their own development teams. And so some of those activities that might take place in buildings that are not owned by the district, we just want to make sure that in this policy, we're really being clear about what applies to which type of school. And then also when we think about capacity building, that was a key type of thing that we were hoping for through this policy, that this was just build the capacity of folks to implement the implementation here. We just acknowledge that more training and communication is needed at both the school and at our partner level to ensure that we can be collaborative partners around this policy. So as we close, just want to share that the next steps that we're continuing through this policy formation, one, we continue to draft standards of acceptance. And in the appendix, you'll see an example of one of the standards that we're developing around books, because we receive those type of offers often and want to make sure that we're doing the best by our donors and communicating what is acceptable by way of books and other things that we've identified in terms of meeting standards of acceptance. We also want to continue our engagement of stakeholders. And as you see here, there's work that's ongoing, there's work to come. And so we look forward to bringing forward more feedback, particularly, like I said, from our school-based personnel, our principals, teachers, and students about how this policy has been implemented and experienced at their level. So we're ensuring that the revisions we're putting forward encompass their feedback as well. That concludes the presentation. I welcome any discussion or questions, but I just thank you for the opportunity to share more.
Thank you so much, Monique, for the work that you've put in this. I appreciate the revisions and the updates that you have included since the policy committee last met. So thank you. I'm going to open it up to board colleagues for comments or thoughts on this first reader. Commissioner Griffin.
This is just a question of curiosity. One, thank you for the presentation. Very easy to follow. I was just curious, how many donations do we end up having to turn away because they didn't meet like the criteria we have set or something?
I don't have an exact number, but I will say it's not often that we have to turn donations away. I mean, ultimately, we are doing our best to make the matches between a school that could benefit from the donation. Sometimes it's really based upon just the administrative burden that might be incurred. So, and whether or not the donation itself has a long-term commitment that the school has to make to continue with maintenance and things. And so when I think about things like large equipment that a school might need to have a maintenance contract around that they just may not be able to support, like those are the types of things where we've seen that there might have been some hesitancy about that. In past, furniture in particular was one thing there was hard to really consider. But oftentimes the things we're proposed are things that schools can benefit from, and we make a match and make it work.
Okay, great. I just was wondering, but you answered all the rest of my questions in your presentation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Monique. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to the team for this. And certainly we look forward to this coming back for second reader when hopefully the board will vote on the policy, vote to approve it. Thank you, Monique.
Thank you, everyone.
I'm sorry. I'm so used to looking up at the screen consistently, but it seems like everyone's here, so we got to survey the room. Commissioner Roberts has a question.
I just have one really quick question. So I see that on slide 21 for the standards of acceptance, the respective departments and offices are listed that kind of accept them. My question is there language that explicitly says once it's accepted through the donation pipeline that it is property of city schools and not the individual that's soliciting the property?
Yes, so that language is included in the policy. I can get the exact place in the policy where it is named, but yes, it becomes a part of our inventory and it should be named in that way, but that is correct.
Thank you.
Sure.
I think that's it this time, Monique. Thank you so much.
Sure, okay. Have a good evening. Thank you.
You too. Enjoy that little one of yours. We will now hear an information item on policy IKEB, the revised graduation standards, and this is first reader, and there is Mavis Jackson. Good evening, Mavis.
Good evening. Good evening. How are you all today?
You're blessed. It's good to see you.
Yeah, same here. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. So
yes,
awesome. So I have the pleasure of presenting IKEB this evening. So I want to thank Board of School Commissioners, Dr. Santelises, Dr. Dabrowski for giving me this opportunity to do this on behalf of Dr. Pfeiffer, who will hopefully be back with us soon enough. And I'm sure she's watching, even though she probably shouldn't be. So this is first reader on the IKEB revised graduation standards. So just an overview. So I'm going to go over the new graduation requirements. I'll talk about the policy and regulation updates, and then I'll talk a little bit about the stakeholder engagement that we've done. So of course, our revisions to IKEB align with board priorities 1, 6, and 7. So we are revising IKEB to be more in compliance with the changes to COMAR requirements. And the graduation requirements do change often, and so we want to make sure that IKEB aligns with those changes. So to highlight a few of the changes, or to highlight all of the changes. So the first change is there's actually a new health requirement. So historically, students have been required to only earn a 0.5 credit for health, starting with this cohort of 9th graders. So students that enter 9th grade this school year, they will actually be required to earn a whole credit of health. In addition, they also need to earn an additional half a credit of an elective just to balance out. Additionally, this current 9th grade cohort, instead of requiring 4 credits of CTE, they actually need to complete an approved course sequence, and that course sequence can be anything from 3 to 12 credits depending on the program of study. Now, this the grade level promotion standards, while this is not a change, this is general information for the public, for the board, just to understand how a student meets that pathway to graduation. And it's really important to know how we promote students in high school to get to that ultimate place of earning the 21 or the 22 credits they need in order to graduate. So for a student to move from 9th to 10th grade, a student needs to earn 5 credits in specific areas. So English 1 or ESOL English 1 or Algebra 1. To become an 11th grader, so to move from 10th to 11th grade, students have to earn 10 credits in specific areas. 3 credits out of English 1, English 2, ESOL English 1, ESOL English 2, Algebra or Geometry, and then 1 credit in both Social Studies and Science. And then to move from 11th to 12th grade, students have to earn 15 credits, 5 credits out of English 1, ESOL English 1, English 2, English 3, ESOL English 2, Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2, and then 3 credits in Science and Social Studies with at least 1 in each. So it's I always like to remind students and families about, you know, what it takes to get to graduation in terms of the promotion. So here's a side-by-side view of what the new graduation requirements look like. So as you can see here, for students that entered high school in 16 and 17 and prior, and students that entered 17 and 18 through 20 to 21. So again, all of our graduation requirements are really based on when you enter high school. So the first day you start 9th grade, that's when your clock ticks, and those are the requirements that you follow based on when you enter high school. So as you can see here, the requirements have been pretty much the same over the last few years, with a total of 21 credits being needed. And here we've highlighted the differences. So now health is a whole credit. And the way the new health credit requirement works is the MSDE is requiring that, or is recommending that students take Health 1 in 9th and 10th grade, and then Health 2 in 11th or 12th grade. The new elective requirements here, so puts it at 2.5 elective requirements. They've removed the advanced tech, and advanced tech typically covers like advanced engineering and things like that. So they've removed that requirement and added the CTE completer requirement. That gets us to 22 total credits. So just to make sure that everything is as clear as possible, we're making the following changes. So because things do shift rather rapidly, we want to make sure that we directly reference COMAR, and then we've eliminated some of the lots of the jargon and the testing requirements and a lot of the course information that was in the policy. And so we really want to make sure that we rely on COMAR as our source of truth. We also wanted to make sure that we more clearly define the appeals process for students, families, schools, and community in case there is a question about or if there's any type of dispute about graduation status. Now, I do want to note that there are some changes still pending with MSDE about college and career readiness standards and testing, and so we will probably have to come back with additional revisions once those that additional guidance is provided. So a few things that we are actively doing to make sure that students and families are well aware of what is required based on when they enter high school. We want to really create a very clear student and family facing tool that allows people to go online to be able to see what is required of a student or a family, or what's required of a student in order to meet the graduation requirement. So it wouldn't be specific to the student. It would be general to say, if you entered high school fall 2021-22, these are the credits that you need in order to earn a diploma in 4 years. So really making sure that it's easy for a student to go on and see what they need to do, and for a family to understand, you know, and make family decisions to make sure they understand what that trajectory looks like for a student through high school. We're also, something new that we've added is requiring all schools to have these very comprehensive conversations with students and families on their graduation status. So school counselors, administrators, and other key staff, they're meeting as we speak with students who are in this cohort. So they are in the cohort that is supposed to graduate in 2022, and having those conversations about whether or not a student is on track to graduate in spring 2022 and summer 2022, in winter 2023, or summer 2023, or spring 2023. So those conversations are happening as we speak with students and families, just to make sure that everyone is on the same page. So in terms of our stakeholder engagement, had really great conversations. I must say that probably my favorite, and I don't know if I'm supposed to say I have a favorite, but ASCBC, they asked the best questions. I mean, they asked really great questions, and it was important for me to see that and to see the types of questions that they were asking. So, for example, they did ask about the new credit requirements and the impact to CTE schools. So for example, one of the students, he said he attends Mervo, and sometimes it is a challenge for students at Mervo to meet all of their credit requirements based on the, the current requirements to meet the CTE requirements, excuse me. So, that was a really great question, and we are working with our CTE team to really make sure that the courses that students need in order to meet their CTE requirements also align with what's needed to get their high school diploma. Another student asked about adding more physical education. So I know we have the extra 0.5 that we added to elective. And so the students did ask about potentially putting that 0.5 at the physical education, since, they did raise the concern that students are, less active. And so trying to figure out if we could potentially put that 0.5 instead of just having it as an elective to putting it to the PE and health. So that's, some additional work that, some things that we're looking into. With the Charter Advisory Board, one of the questions was about adding the charter operators to the appeals process. So those are the big takeaways from our stakeholder engagement. And this is our team. Thank you so much. And now it's time for questions.
Mavis, thank you so much, Ms. Jackson, for the presentation. You answered my question also that I was going to have about how are the requirements communicated to students. You do those sessions every third quarter. I would be interested.
So this year we are recommending third quarter, but going forward, we're actually going to push to have them happen at least twice a year.
Okay. That's good. And you mentioned COMAR and how COMAR is updated. Just like earlier, we saw Juneteenth added to the calendar as a state recognized holiday. But COMAR updates, and I know right now there is legislation around financial literacy, not necessarily being a requirement, so to speak, right now, but I think that we legislators pushing for that. So I'm sure that we'll see that update when it comes. I know that you'll bring it to us.
Absolutely.
Any additional questions, thoughts on first reader? Commissioner Reed? I think we're good. Thank you, Ms. Jackson.
Thank you. I hope everyone has a wonderful and safe evening.
Before I turn it over to our board chair, this is our final meeting as a full board in March, and March happens to be Women's History Month. And I just want to make sure that we as a board take the time to acknowledge our leadership right now, and Commissioner Richardson, who is our chair, who's doing an incredible job leading the work of our school board, in addition to Dr. Santelises. This weekend, I had an opportunity to join her at the Council of Great City Schools Legislative Conference, and folks look to you for your leadership and guidance. She's on the executive committee for that council, and so I just want to take a moment to recognize all of our leading ladies that are in the room that are making a true difference in city schools and in the Baltimore community. So I just wanted to make sure we did that.
Thank you very much, Commissioner McFadden. I just wanted to make notice of our upcoming meetings. We have our Teaching and Learning Committee meeting. It is a virtual meeting on Tuesday, April 5th from 3:30 to 5:30. Our Operations Committee meeting is Tuesday, April 19th, 10:30 to 12:15. That's also a virtual meeting. Our Policy Committee meeting, Tuesday, April 19th, 3:30 to 5:30. That is a virtual meeting. Our special public board meeting is a virtual meeting Tuesday, April 19th, 2022. We have our executive session meeting. Our next executive session meeting will be on Tuesday, April the 26th, followed by our public board meeting on the same day at 5 p.m. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move, Robert.
Thank you, Commissioner Roberts. Is there a second?
Second, Griffin.
Thank you, Commissioner Griffin. All in favor? Commissioner Bondima?
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks? Yes. Commissioner Griffin?
Yes.
Commissioner Horowitz?
Yes.
Commissioner McFadden?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Abstain.
Commissioner Roberts?
Yes.
Commissioner Sally?
Yes.
I am in favor. This motion passes with
8 in favor.
8 in favor and 1 abstention.
I'm sorry, I misheard you. I'm in favor.
This motion passes unanimously. Thank you to the public for hanging out with us. Thank you to the staff for all of the presentations and the hard work. And thank you to my fellow board members. Have a great night. Stay safe. See you next time.